Just waiting for everybody to come in.
Yeah, here we go.
Hey, everybody. Just waiting for everybody to enter. And if you would, everybody, as you're coming in, please mute your microphone. Although we will give you opportunities to ask questions. So welcome, everyone. This is Flight School Connector from AOPA. And this month's topic is organization augmentation, scaling up your business. That's kind of, if you're a fan of Big Bang Theory, we were trying to go with that theme a little bit there. And today, my name is Chris Moser, Senior Director of Flight Training Education at AOPA. And with me today, as always, we have Steven Schroeder, our Coordinator of Flight Training Initiative, running everything sort of behind the scenes, although he's on camera, not something you get to see on every webinar. And our special guest today is Brenda Tibbs, the owner, and we would say owner, how about CEO and founder of Bravo Flight Training, right here in Frederick, Maryland. So Brenda, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And she's going to give us her perspective, because one thing that Brenda has done just very recently over the past couple of years is grown her flight school from one location that was only about 5 years ago, I want to say, to 3 locations now, just recently opening up. It was over this past year, like in 2021, like the summer, I want to say, Martinsburg.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. So 2 locations. So we're going to talk a little bit about some basic research and some recommendations if you're going to try to scale up your business. And then we're going to have Brenda tell us a little bit about her perspective on that. And of course, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions, whether it's in the chat, which you will see if you look on your menu, if you're using the browser, like if you go down towards the bottom, a little thing will pop up, a little menu, and there's like a little bubble, like a cartoon bubble. And so you can chat in there. You can raise your hand to let us know if you do have a question. We'll definitely do that towards the end, letting you ask questions. So let's get into just a couple of just business items, and then we're going to get started into the content. Just want to give a shout out to Sporty's Pilot Shop. I want to thank them for sponsoring our program. And if you are not familiar and you're interested in potentially starting maybe a pilot shop at your school or something like that, Sporty's has a dealer program where they'll give you wholesale prices. You can see there, low minimum same-day shipping, and lots of materials for training. So check it out at sportys.com/dealer, the Sporty's dealer program. All right. And then the other announcement we wanted to make, this is very timely. If you know of any, especially we're looking for high school students or high school teachers, but if you know of any high school students that have not applied for this scholarship yet, you can see that there are 80 $10,000 scholarships up this year. The deadline is coming up in just about 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks. And there's for high school teachers as well, plus additional categories. You can find out more at aopa.org/scholarships. The one thing with those high school scholarships is you do have to have your written test done for the private. So that's kind of a barrier. And so just if you know of anybody that's got that written test done or is about to take it, tell them about the scholarship, because it's a great opportunity to get $10,000 for their training. Okay, so let's get to today's agenda. Today we're going to be talking about, like we said, scaling up. And this is really timely because literally next week, and Brenda's been part of this program too, next week we're going to be going to Redbird Migration and doing the Flight Training Experience Awards ceremony, where we announce the top regional winners, and then we reveal who the top national flight school and national CFI, and something Brenda is a recipient of those awards. And so we'll be doing that next week. And then Brenda, maybe you can even tell us too, that one of the things that happened when you got that award, business increased a little bit, didn't it?
It did, actually. Well, the timing was fantastic. It was when I opened, not so much when I opened the business, but when I was able to start establishing myself here at the airport and was able to have an office and increased aircraft. That was all at the same time that I got the award. And yeah, it was really good.
And
it
so
was great for business.
Yes, but I assume it was probably a challenge though in trying to then meet the needs of all these customers that all of a sudden were coming, kind of a big thing. And so that's one of the things, this is one of the reasons that I've wanted to do this topic for a long time, which is just giving folks an idea of whether you're planning to scale up or if you're, in the awards program, you happen to get an award, how can you be prepared to meet that demand or to try to just naturally, organically grow your company. So that's what we're going to take a look at. You can see on today's agenda the main topics. And just to give you a little background on where all this came from, I did some research online, and I'm going to give you guys a handout. I think Stephen's going to provide that in the meeting information here today, which has the links to a lot of the articles that I looked at. And what I did was I went and I looked at the articles that talked about how to scale up a small business. and I compared. I wanted to see what were the common things, and that's what I found. These were the most common things that kept coming up over and over again. And then we had Elizabeth Tennyson, who unfortunately couldn't be with us here today, but she, with her business, or she has an MBA in her background, she provided some information and feedback in here as well. And then, of course, we've got Brenda here, who's done this in the real world with a flight school. So we're hoping to give you guys some good advice, some stuff to think about, and then we'll certainly be open to questions and anything else that you might like to provide. So let's do this. You click if it'll work. There we go. So we wanted to start off with, and unfortunately, the poll system in Teams, the Teams webinar, doesn't quite work yet, but we figured we could just do this in the chat. Do you plan on substantially growing your business in the near future? And so here are the choices. You can just type this into the chat. Again, if you don't know where the chat is, just put your mouse, hover it down towards near the bottom of the display picture there, and you'll see the little bubble thing. It's an A, this year. Yes. B would be maybe in the next few years. C, I'm not really sure yet. And D, no thanks. I'm just happy where they are. I don't want to do anything like that. And so, Brenda, while we're waiting for folks to fill it out, look at Chris Erlinson. I love it. 5 A's. So, Brenda, just thoughts, and we'll go back and see what folks are putting in here. What were your thoughts on that? Did you really plan ahead and think about, like, I want to expand the business?
That was actually part of my original plan. I wanted to have 3 locations, and I wanted to open a maintenance facility. And I have my 3 locations and my maintenance facility.
So where do you go from now? Are you going to think now maybe to the 4th or other things, or are you kind of like going to kind of ride where it is?
A 4th could be in our future. But honestly, I'd like to grow what we have. I'd like to focus a lot of energy into growing what I've already established.
So like solidifying the locations and growing the customer base there. Perfect. Okay, so let's take a look. We've got, just going back and through, and just going to do a kind of ad hoc adding in. I see lots of A's, so lots of folks thinking I want to scale up this year. I see 1 or 2 B's maybe in there for maybe in the next few years. And then one person said, I'm actually good the way it is right now. It's Jamie up there in Alaska. And so that's good. So it seems like we have got the right audience for folks mostly interested in trying to grow their business. So let's see if we can help them out. All right. So the first part was, and I'd already asked Brenda this question too, the idea for planning for growth. One of the things that I found, and Elizabeth mentioned in, and I know that Brenda in our conversations as well, totally, you had a plan. And that is one of the key things, is you need to have a plan if you want to do this. And so the common recommendations are, make sure you have clear goals. And Brenda, your goals were very clear. It was, I want 2 locations in a maintenance shop, and boom, you have planned for it. I'm assuming you built towards that, and it happened, right? You made this happen.
Yes.
Perfect. And so the other thing you want to do, and I'm going to go through this real quick, and then I'm going to see if I can get Brenda's input on this and how it sort of looked in your view. But you want to be careful. Make sure you evaluate the risk, because clearly there are risks involved. There's going to be money involved in this. You're going to put yourself out there. It could be in leases or getting aircraft and whatever. So there's a risk there for your business involved in it. So you want to make sure that you know what those risks are, and know, are you ready? And really think about it hard. Don't assume that the rosy picture of it, I'm going to build it, they will come. You really want to make sure you take a hard look and say, can I survive this? How's this going to work? Where do I think this revenue is going to come from, or the business? And even have, Elizabeth had recommended off ramps. If you see, like, you should have, maybe even think about milestones or certain things where if this happens, do I have a way of getting out? Is there a way for me to do an off ramp? And then what about the increased sales? If you have these increased sales, can you get them? Number one, can you get these increased sales at these locations? And I know, Brenda, you had some experience, I know, down at Gaithersburg regarding that. And then can you deliver on them? And then what are the other resources or things that you'll need to make it happen? And even to the point of making a detailed sales growth forecast. So, Brenda, I know that you did a lot of this. Can you just tell us a little bit about just some of the details that you did in making your plan for this?
Okay, so one of the things you brought up was that you knew I had the challenge down in Gaithersburg, which I have had. It is a very wealthy area, and there is a really high population density, and it seemed like it was going to be a lot more beneficial than it has been, because there's 5 flight schools at that airport, whereas Martinsburg is a little bit more of a rural area, and it doesn't have that same population density. And we've just been doing fantastic there because there's not that competition. Yeah, it's just been so easy to grow the Martinsburg location in spite of that. And oh, and I'm forgetting all of the questions that you asked, but a lot of this has been organic growth. So I've just, as we have seen the need to expand, done it. And oh, Chris, direct me a little bit more.
Yeah, no worries. So one of the things I would wonder about, well, one of the things I want to ask, you mentioned that it was a little bit of a challenge at Gaithersburg because there's more competition there. Did you have any lessons that you learned from that you might recommend to other people, saying, like, you know, did you know it was going to be competitive before you went in there? Or was that something you discovered as you set it up, or like what happened
I
there?
did know it would be competitive when we moved in there because there was a very large flight school already established there, but I was a little bit surprised at how competitive it has been there, but that's okay. And
And
so I think that going to an airport with less competition obviously is going to be better. And I don't think that I would make that mistake again in the future.
so the one thing is, if lots of flight schools really consider that hard, how are you going to break into that market? And you know, is that,
So trying to show them that we're different. And I
yeah.
do think that we have a lot to offer at Bravo. We do a lot of activities with our students. We do a lot of flyouts, group activities. But again, that's been a little bit harder with a smaller group down there.
I know one of the things that you had mentioned, and we're going to talk about this later in the session, but about, because you said you have a really good person that does spreadsheets. That's a part we'll talk about later that helps you. But did you do some of these things? Like, did you find it helpful at all, or did you look for kind of predicting what you thought your sales might be, or sort of that market
So,
research?
well, we did do a little bit of market research, and you're
Mhm.
right. I have somebody who is amazing with spreadsheets, and she lays it all out for me and puts in the fake numbers that I come up with. And we see how much we really have to do in order to pay for everything. And if that looks like a reasonable assessment, and if it's something that's not going to be reasonable, then obviously we wouldn't do it. But I also look at, can I pay the rent regardless of the income?
There you go.
So my Frederick location has done so well that I know that I can pay the rent on my Gaithersburg or Martinsburg locations regardless of making any money there. Not that that's the way I want it to go, but I know that we've got it covered, and I'm not going to get myself into a hole. So I would not want to overextend myself and damage my business by overextending and finding out that we couldn't take care of any of
And
the
that,
obligations that we've
I
made.
think that's the key thing. It sounds like you've hit these where you really thought about, like, okay, this is what I'm predicting. Like, you examined all the costs. You said, okay, this is how much it's going to cost me to be there. I've got that covered no matter what happens. But I really do feel like, from what I'm looking at, there's going to be some sales coming in, and I can break into this market and make it work. So
Yes,
perfect.
absolutely. The
Awesome.
big thing is to have obviously customers, but even bigger than that is to have the airplanes for the customers to fly.
Yeah.
Like having enough airplanes available for the location and having staff. Right now it's a little bit hard to find good flight instructors. And so being sure that I can cover those two things, because if I can, then we're going to have more success, obviously.
Perfect. And we're going to talk about that too in just a little bit too, about building the team. And then the one person just had a quick question. Eric is asking, are the two other locations, or are your locations part 141 or 61 or both, or what's the deal?
Frederick and Martinsburg are both 61 and 141. Gaithersburg is unfortunately only, well, not unfortunately, it's only 61.
Okay. And so that's something maybe you're planning on getting to be 141 in the future, or?
Possibly not.
Okay.
Honestly, it because of the availability of office space in Gaithersburg, it is not really lending itself to have the room for a 141 program.
Okay. Makes sense.
So even though we follow all the same syllabi, everything is the same. We just don't have the space down there that we do in the other locations. And that is a really big component of this.
Cool. All right, so we're going to go on to the next slide here. This one's a quick poll, and we want to make sure we keep our topics moving right along. So we got lots of stuff to talk about. With our poll question, we've got, just as again, if you would just throw it in the chat, you'll look for that little bubble, A, B, C, D, or E. It says, what worries you most when you think about growing your business? Is it getting the right people, equipment, or tools? Obviously, that's something Brenda thought about. B, finding enough time to take on more. as in more stuff to do. And then C, finding the money. D, not knowing what I don't know. That's sort of that fear. And I know that was something that we had discussed a long, long time ago as you were kind of figuring out how to run the business. And then E, nothing, I got this, no problem. And it seems like I'm looking at the things in the chat there, lots of B's. So finding enough time, because I know that definitely what the theme seems to be with flight school owners is that idea of there's so much going on. And then we got some A's in there too, getting the right people, equipment, or tools. And I know that airplanes are a challenge right now too to get them, just in the market the way that it is. Very cool.
I think that you will find the time if you can find the right people. People help cover.
Oh,
that
you're
time.
gonna lead us into another topic we're gonna do soon here
Oh,
too.
sorry.
That's awesome. And then we do have one person, John said F, finding more customers, of course, too, just doing that and finding that. Of course, I know that right now, generally, it seems like most people seem to be thinking that the market's going pretty well for that. But, you know, obviously we know that aviation is very, very cyclical. Okay, so getting the money for expansion. And so I'll be really short about this. And then maybe Brenda, you can tell us just briefly what you did once I'm finished. But obviously to get that new equipment, to get the staff to be able to do that, you're going to have to find some funding sources. And oftentimes people think of a loan or maybe investors, but in the research that I did, I found there was a bunch. That was self-funding is one way if you've got the money saved up or if you can pull it out of your business. There are getting a bank loan or a line of credit is another way of doing it. They mentioned, you know, obviously investors, but of course, if you get investors now, you're giving up some of the ownership of the company. And so that's something to consider, the kind of the cost of benefits there. Getting a grant is possible as well. And I know that it was in an article. It was from a few years ago, but I guess there were some business grants, whether it's crowdfunding, joint ventures, or just creating new predictable revenue streams, which I imagine, Brenda, I know you did the maintenance shop too, but can you tell us a little bit about what you did when you wanted to expand? How did you go about funding it?
Well, really, it's been all self-funding. For example, Gaithersburg was first, and like I said, I just made sure that I had the money to cover any expenses that may be coming up, and I did have the money to cover that. I didn't really staff the office very well. We had flight instructors there, and we had the airplane, but we don't need front desk staff quite yet if we only have one person working at a time. I've let everything kind of grow organically and it's done well for me. So again, Martinsburg has grown a little faster and we've had to hire more staff to take care of that, but it's paid for itself.
Very cool. So the self-funding, and I know you've been very fortunate that way with having that ability to sort of just, and I guess maybe that's something we can talk about later is that accounting or how you were able to do that. I guess it's just business is going well, probably being responsible with the money, I imagine, and then being able to save some of it up.
I'm very frugal with the money and the business is going well.
Awesome. That's perfect. I love it. Okay, let's go ahead to the next topic, which is, this was one that I thought was interesting. It says that people that tend to be entrepreneurs, and maybe this is true for pilots too, often are reticent to ask for help. And the recommendations or the research and the other things people said is it's okay to ask for help. You should ask for help. Reach out to, whether it's leveraging the knowledge and skills from others around you. And oftentimes I've talked to several flight school owners that talk about customers that they've had that are good sources of to help out the school because they believe in the school, learning from your competitors. So going and kind of, you know, watching them, how is it that they're doing it, especially if they're bigger than you are, how are they doing it? And is that a way to learn? Consider getting a mentor, whether it's just someone you meet in the business community. And remember, they don't need to be in aviation, but maybe there's a strategic advisor or another experienced business leader that you can make friends with, or another flight school owner too, because I know that that's something that Brenda did too. You talked about creating a network of people that you were able to speak to. Or finally, even just hiring somebody, getting outside expertise for specialized job, whether it's like an accountant or a lawyer or whatever it may be, but building a network of those providers, partners, even customers that you can then use to help grow it. So I know that when I mentioned this during our initial conversation, Brenda, you were like, yep, totally. And the two things that I remember you mentioning was, well, specifically one was talking to other flight school owners. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience with that?
Yeah, talking like such as Jamie, who's on here right now, talking to other flight school owners is huge. Just seeing what they do, what has worked for them, and just bouncing ideas off of people has been a huge deal. And then you also mentioned that I have somebody who helps me with my spreadsheets.
Yes.
She
Yes.
doesn't really know anything about aviation, but she's fantastic with building things like that. I couldn't do what she does at all, but I'm great at plugging the numbers into what she comes up with, and she's good at asking me the questions to help build these spreadsheets. So that has been a huge help. And Chris, you know, I've got Catherine that works with
Oh
me.
yeah.
She does
She's
all of my
amazing.
bookkeeping. She's amazing. But I was not able to afford that at first. At first, it was me taking care of everything. And then as I became too busy to be able to keep up with that, that's when, well, in the beginning, just using QuickBooks, I hired somebody to help teach me QuickBooks because that was kind of hard to just jump into the business and learn on my own. So I had somebody teach me how to do that. And then as I became busier, I had Catherine come on board and she would just do some of my bookkeeping part-time in the mornings or on the weekends. And then I was able to have her come on full-time to be able to help me keep everything straight. Because again, I keep saying I've had everything grow organically. And at this point, I could never keep up with all of that.
And that's great news for the business. And I know that we were very sad at AOPA because Catherine worked for us for a while, and she is amazing. And so you're lucky to have
Yeah,
her. Yeah.
I
So that's the
am.
key thing. Is it's really it's coming back to that thing too of just find good, which we'll talk about the team. I think it's coming up in a couple of slides here, but it's just finding the right people and really filling in those parts of the what is it that I'm not as good at. Let's get somebody in here that can help me with that in some fashion. So let's take a look at the next one, which is identify and stick to core values. This was by far, and if this is one for me, I know just from as a customer, I've had this conversation with Steven actually about the idea that, you know, you see businesses and they're doing really well and they provide a great service. And then there's always this pressure to grow, 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 grow. And then oftentimes what you unfortunately see happen is the business grows, and then it loses what was special about it, right? And so that they really, almost every article that I looked up and checked out was stick to those core values. And in fact, you can see one of the quotes I got or paraphrased here, which was, as you grow, things are going to change, but you have to safeguard the thing that brought you success. Whatever it was that made you special, you have to safeguard that because that was the secret sauce to your business. And make sure that everybody in your company knows what those values are. So it's like, you know, what is it you want them to believe, or how do you want them to look at things? How do you want them to talk to customers and to view their customers? What is it you want them to do? So you really want to share that with them and show like, this is what makes this company special. And Brenda, I know that this was when I said this before, when our conversation, you were like, absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of your core value is at Bravo?
Well, of course, customer service, I should say safety first, always, right?
Yeah,
But
always.
customer service and having fun and including everybody in what we do. I think that here at Bravo, we do a lot of extracurricular type things like having speakers or going on field trips and doing flyouts. And that is one thing I think that we do really well. We follow a syllabus, we're a 141 program, but we really try to bring everybody in and make this a safe place for people to learn. So that has been something that's been very important to me, that we extend to the 3 locations. And that's why when I was saying earlier that I want to focus on growing what we have, I don't want to spread us too thin that I can't continue to focus on those core values.
Absolutely. And one of the things too, let me just click on something there. And one of the things I was and actually it leads into, I wanted to ask you, how did you protect those core values? Like as you've been growing, you've gotten more CFIs, you have 2 more locations. So what is it kind of practically that you do that you feel is kind of the key part of making sure those values are protected, providing that fun, that customer service, all those
Well,
aspects?
one thing we talked about is like starting to farm out some of your work. So I don't have a lot of students of my own anymore, unfortunately, even though I enjoy having my own students. I do more of the stage checks and I make sure that I go to all 3 locations and I'm sitting down and talking to my instructors. I'm talking to the students, making sure that they're getting what they need. And I'm doing the stage checks to make sure that everything is staying the quality that we need. You know, that's how I know what's going on, is by flying with people for the stage check.
Cool. And I guess I'd imagine doing the stage checks is I was a check airman in my full-time CFI life. And I can remember too, that what's one of the key things you can also figure out, like, well, how are the instructors doing? Because you can clearly see it, right?
Absolutely.
I imagine you're doing it that way as well. Awesome. Well, by the way, I was remiss. I missed in the last call the sharing part. I wanted to mention, because I know that we've got one of our colleagues, Chris, on here from Nashville Flight Training. One of the things I wanted to mention was when it comes to asking for help, there's an organization, if you've not heard of it, FSANA, F-S-A-N-A, that's Foxtrot Sierra Alpha November Alpha, the Flight School Association of North America. And that is a good one too to check out. They have a mentorship program set up. Also, going to Redbird Migration, it's coming up next week. It's an annual thing. That's a great place to meet other flight school owners as well. And hopefully we're hoping to do that through this channel as well. So that's just some options you have to meet some other flight school owners. And the big secret is don't try to talk to the people that are on your field, because they're likely not going to want to share anything because they're a direct competitor. But find somebody that's a little farther away, because they're usually more willing to share, because you have that sort of a kindred spirit. All right. Let's see. So Brian, there it is. So Chris just threw a link into FSANA. Thanks, Chris. So he just wanted a real quick question, because I did want to move on to the next topic here, but he says, are you making or losing money on discovery flights, and how many discovery flights are you doing in a month? Can you give us a short answer on that one?
I didn't think to count how many discovery flights we're doing a month, so I'm not really sure, but we do them almost daily. We'll do, several on the weekend and several throughout the week. And if I'm breaking even on discovery flights, I'm pretty happy, but I try to make a few dollars on them.
So fair. So do you generally find that you generally do, or at least break even?
Yeah, we do break even on them. We're charging $109 for discovery flights right now. And I like to make myself available because, so again, I'm not flying with a lot of students anymore. So what I try to do is make myself available. So when somebody's done doing the flight with their discovery flight, I like to roll it into a meet and greet with me. And then I can sit down and talk to them about what all to expect with flight training and what the next steps are and things like that. My flight instructors can continue on with their day and keep their schedule rolling, because, the typical 30 minutes of flight and 30 minutes of ground just doesn't give you enough time to answer all those questions.
Exactly. And I see in the chat, there's a few other folks saying that some make money on it. And Felipe says it's a good qualifier, right? People are going to have to spend some money to do flight training. And so it's a good qualifier. If they're not willing to do it there, then maybe they aren't really committed yet to doing it, even though we'd love to give them the bug. All right, let's go ahead and see the chat. We'll let that happen in the chat there. One of the key things too, obviously, in providing those core values is, as you mentioned, is getting the right people. By far, one of the really important things to do is have a great team. You hear this from businesses across the board that do well with, especially with customer service, is get the right people, get them, and don't forget, not just CFIs for a flight school, but think about your customer service side of things. Make sure your CFIs are going to provide that customer service. Management roles are important. And as you even already admitted, Brenda, which is don't think that you can do everything. You can't do it all. So fill in the roles as you need them. Look for consistency and quality in your people. That's the kind of the recommendations. I'll be curious to get your input on that. And then look for people who want to excel, and then let them do it. Let them go excel. And I already mentioned the part about sort of filling in gaps, and then invest in your team. This is where it's like, it shows it's like, if you're able, pay your team or invest in them, help them with training, whatever it is, because if you do that, that tends to lead them to work harder for you and let them to drive the vision of the service you want to provide. I know, Brenda, we talked about you really are proud of your instructors that you've hired. Can you give us just an idea of a little bit about what you do when it comes to building that team and how you go about that?
Well, I have a couple of things with my instructors. I like people who are going to be here for the long haul. So, for example, I've got Katie, Mike, Jim, Frank. They're going to be here for a long time. They can start with a student and finish with that same student and do their next rating too. They will be here when that person comes back for their flight review. But, we also need to have young people that are coming up and going to the airlines. They work really hard. They work long hours because they want to get their time in. They want to make that next step. So having the balance between the two, I think, is fantastic. And I love when I can train my own CFIs and have them, do their flight CFI training and then have them work here, because then they really know right from the beginning what's important to us, and we focus on that during their training.
Perfect. And like I said, you're right up front about, like, this is what we need to see here. This is what I want. And have you ever had to turn somebody away, or like, how are you able to filter that? Is it just kind of a gut feeling, or what is it that helps you do that?
Usually it's a gut feeling.
Right.
I've flown with people and said, as much as I would enjoy working with you, get your skills up to snuff and then come back and talk to me again, and I'd be happy to have you here. Or I've flown with people who are fantastic, but they just don't fit in with our culture here, and that's fine too. There'll be another flight school that's fantastic for them, but just not necessarily here. But usually it's a gut feeling, and that's also why I like training our own CFIs, because then I know more about them and I know if they're going to fit in or not.
We've got two questions, and I want to let the chat. I love the chat. The folks are chiming in because we've got lots of flight school owners in here, which is the whole purpose, the whole point. And so Adam had mentioned, he's asking just in general, and maybe we'll point this to you just briefly, Brendan, because I'm going to keep us moving on too. But asking about, how much do you invest in that? And another person was asking, do you do uniforms or business attire, that sort of thing. So how is it?
We do a combination of uniforms and business attire. I expect people to dress in business attire, and we provide shirts. So whatever people want to wear, as long as it's within that realm. And then I'm not sure that I understood the question about me investing.
He was asking, do other flight schools invest in professional standardization and training when you get your new hires, like it's sort of onboarding them and letting them know, like, okay, this is how we do customer service. This is how we do this.
Oh, of course. I spend the day getting them set up with what we're going to be doing. We have to get them checked out in all the airplanes. I have assistant chief flight instructors that can help me with getting them checked. And I'm going to say checked out in the airplanes, but not just they know how to fly it, but that they know what we do. And I'm so sorry. I'm losing my voice for a second.
Okay, no worries.
You can come back.
Yeah, no worries. Let's go ahead and I'll jump on to the next one, which is getting into, and this is kind of leads over from the parts of the team, which is having your company culture. So part of the key here is your culture is that idea. Basically, it's that idea of how we do things around here, whether it's with your staff, your customers, your community. It's your reputation. It really determines what your reputation is. And one of the key parts is that make sure that you, as the owner, the founder, the leader, you lead by example. And it's more than just values, although they should kind of work together, but it includes things like, how do you reward success or deal with failure with your team? How do you assign the work? Scheduling new students. So is it something where maybe it's seniority based? It's something where it's based on performance or just availability, or you take a round robin approach? What kind of language do you use? Is it inclusive, respectful? Or, some places, I know that you'll hear about some places where they kind of get more into the, that's a really military type place, and they're much more abrupt or whatever, or maybe something like that. So whatever, what's the culture you have that way? How do you talk about your customers when they aren't around to hear you? Do you celebrate personal events, employee babies, birthdays, weddings, or even among the customers too? And then how will you do these things when you have, and of course the part of this then, that culture, as you want to grow, if you've developed a culture like that, how are you going to do it when you have triple the number of employees? How are you going to carry that out? So Brenda, along those lines, it's the idea too of you've got your employees, they are so critical to the business. What is it that you feel like, how do you kind of provide that cultural part of it? How do you shape that? What's been your experience?
We celebrate all successes. I mean, really, any successes for our students or our flight instructors, we make a big deal out of it. And as well as that, I kind of want to focus for a second on, how do you talk about your customers when they aren't around to hear? I find that really shapes people's attitudes. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's fun after work to complain about some experience you've had today, or talk about, whatever your day was like. But we've got to be really careful about the way we form our attitudes and the way we expect our flight instructors to form their attitudes about our customers, because we want respect for everybody. That's a really huge deal. So if we were to say a lot of negative things when they're not around, that could lead into a negative attitude when they are around. And then when you were talking about work schedule, there is a round robin issue. You want to make sure everybody has work. You want to match people's schedule. If somebody can only fly early in the morning, you don't assign them to somebody who doesn't fly early in the morning. But also, this goes back to the discovery flight. When that's over, I sit and I talk to people. I ask them what they do for a living, if they have a family, what their goals are. And I try to get a feel for who's going to be the best person to assign that person to. Or I might give them the option of 2 different flight instructors. Like, you might want to try flying with Katie, and then you might want to try flying with Mike, and see who you really connect with. Um, and also, I think that my flight instructors are, as much as I want them to all fit in here and we have a certain attitude, I feel, I also have very different people that work here. And I think that's really important because we have lots of different customers. And one student might pair well with Katie, and another student might not, might really pair well with Mike. And all of that's okay. They're both fantastic instructors. And it's just about looking for everybody having that positive experience.
Perfect. So, and again, I think you exude that, just even what you talk about, the idea of a positive experience. That's that idea of lead by example, and just trying to make sure that's kind of the key, is figure that out and how do you to keep it going. And I think that that's that if you lead by example and you make sure that your employees are doing that, you're right. I agree with you. The positive attitude, how that leads. I know when I was teaching, it was a very similar thing. I just tried to avoid the teachers that were complaining about stuff, because it makes nobody happy. All right, let's go ahead. We've got some other questions in the chat, but I'm going to save those for our questions at the end, because we've got some questions that are a little different on the topic. And so recognition of students and that. So we'll see if we can get back to those in our Q&A at the end here. The other thing you want to do that's recommended is determine what sets your company apart. And we've already kind of touched on this with Brenda talking about when she went down and was at the Gaithersburg location specifically, talking about like, well, what makes me competitive compared to them? And she really felt like that idea of the fun, the customer service was key. And really, it's about it's like figuring out what makes you different. It's how you do things rather than what you do, because everybody provides flight training in this sense, but it's how you provide that. What are the differentiators? What's that edge that you have? And is this a differentiator that would be hard for a competitor just to copy? And you really want to focus on those things that are kind of special to you. And then as you grow, you've got to really think about, how am I going to maintain that? If it's always been personal customer service, well, then what am I going to do to maintain that if all of a sudden I've tripled my customer base? So really be deliberate about it. You have to make sure that it happens. That's kind of that idea of sticking to your core values, because it won't just happen by itself. And I thought this was a great recommendation when I read this one, which is look at your business from your customer's point of view, because it's so easy that you look at it all day long, every day, to really try to maybe talk to the customers and really try to put yourself in their place and say, what is it that they are experiencing? I want to find that out, because that's going to be key. Because if I can delight them, as I mentioned, they will help you grow. They will delight you, because good customers are going to go out and they're going to do way better marketing than you could ever do, because they're going to give you positive recommendations and bring customers in and just really do that for you. So again, I know I want to make sure that we keep moving for time wise, but Brenda, just any ideas there in the sense of how you felt like, we've already know what you felt like set your customer up or your company apart. What is it you've kind of done, or how did you go about trying to make sure you maintain that as you grew?
It's tough. It is tough, but I think that I have great people in place, and I make sure that everybody knows what standard I expect. And when I say that, what I mean is, we cut people's shirts. We post their pictures on all of social media. We make a big deal out of when they've soloed or passed a check ride. We make sure that we include everybody in any activities that we're doing. So I think that those are things that I've just kind of helped people who work with me to know that we do these things, and to maintain that expectation.
And obviously that must carry on. You going maybe around to those other locations too, are kind of ensuring that that's happening there as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Just touching base with everybody is a really big deal.
Cool. And I think that kind of answers one of Brian had asked a question about that. How do you recognize students? And you just actually answered that question right on with the cutting the shirts and making a big deal. And I've seen your Facebook post and Instagram post. So
yeah, and we hang their shirt tails up around the office so that everybody knows who's soloed, and Yeah, we try to make a really big deal out of it.
Awesome. And that's
It's
important, because as
important.
we all know, that solo,
Yeah.
that first solo is important to everybody. And we all remember it. So the next part is develop processes. And again, this is that idea of scaling up. And as you're like in your case, Brenda, going out to different locations, it's like you want things to happen the same. Well, you've got to have the process has to be the same. So it's really, before you expand, really know what your processes are, and they need to be simple and repeatable, because if they get too complex, it's going to slow people down. They're going to kind of be like, I don't want to do this anymore, or they'll be resistant to it. So make it simple. It's important, just like we fly the airplane with standardized strategies. I know that I teach my students flow and do the check afterwards and all that sort of stuff. It's important the same way that you do your work. Strategies, standardized strategy, have a workflow so it's the same every time, because that way it will be consistent with how you want it. Develop SOPs. If you can, automate and do tech, because it'll save you time, not to mention make it easier for your students. Things like accounting, payroll, customer management, inventory, scheduling, all that kind of, anything you can, if you can automate it, it's a good idea to do that. And then it will help you. There's somebody's a guest, special guest. Will help you build your team more smoothly. No worries. Will help you build your team more smoothly, and then minimizes questions, especially if you've got an SOP and you've got this stuff down. It minimizes questions coming to you all the time about how do we do this? Well, you got the SOP, so that way they can come to you with really important questions rather than stuff that's pretty basic. Have you found that you've done those kinds of things too, Brenda, with your business as you've expanded out? Have you developed processes that have gone?
I could always do better, but but yeah, keeping things simple and repeatable is huge, and having a checklist for things like when we have a new customer. Every new student has a folder, and in that folder is a checklist, and that checklist we go through and make sure that that's all taken care of. Not everything has to be done on day one, but everything has to be done before solo, for example. And just having that checklist gets rid of any question as to what needs to be done.
Perfect. Sounds
just
like
as an example.
It sounds like you've nailed that in that sense of, and I imagine that went right to the other locations. This is how we're going to handle records, and obviously being a 141 school, you're well versed in record keeping. Yeah, and doing that for the Part 61 as well. All right, I know there was a question. It looks like they've already answered the question. They're asking for CR recommendations. We'll do that at the end as well. Let's go ahead. We've got 2 more points we wanted to hit, and then we'll open it up to any questions you might have or other things. So the next one is, and Brenda, you already mentioned that you've done this. It's like that idea of firing yourself from the small stuff. And I remember speaking to you early on in the process when you were first getting the school going, how you just were like, you felt like you were overwhelmed and you're trying to figure out this tax stuff. And so it's really, as you grow, you have that capability, as you mentioned too, like I'm busy, I'm doing flight instruction now, bring somebody on that knows how to do these other things. Whatever it is, maybe you love doing accounting, then that's what you do. But most of the time,
it turns out I don't.
I would guess that's probably true for a lot of people. And so as you grow, hire the right people, then teach, train, and delegate these responsibilities to them and let it go. Focus on what it is you need to do that big picture. And then Elizabeth recommended the Eisenhower Matrix as a way to think about it. These are the things that you as the owner, the founder, should be doing. And you can see her, she says that if it is not urgent or on the important side of it, you shouldn't be doing it. So basically that entire bottom row, those are not things you should be doing. So it's like, if it's important and urgent, right? If you classify it as that, you need to be doing that. If it is not urgent, but it's important, then you should be involved in planning that. But if it's something where it's not urgent or important, then let somebody else do that. Delegate that to someone else who can handle that. Or if it's not urgent and it's not important, how about just getting rid of it altogether? So if, I guess that first one I meant in quadrant 3 was the urgent but not important versus the neither, then don't even bother with it. I remember I used to have this is kind of a silly thing, but when I was teaching, I had a way of doing this. So they would give us lots of paperwork stuff and they'd stick it in our mailbox. And I figured out for another teacher, if I just left it in there long enough and nobody asked me about it, it probably didn't have to do it. So that was my way of figuring out if it was urgent and important or not, because they would ask me about it if it was. So this is something I know, Brenda, you've mentioned that you have
American
done.
Aviation, this is Tara.
And if go ahead, if you can mute them, Stephen.
Good.
So
how are you, Micah?
How have you gone about doing that, Brenda, with the idea of firing yourself from the small stuff?
Well, I think it's a lot of what you just said. The things that I'm good at, the things I enjoy, I try to keep. And then there's a lot of things that I'm not very good at or I don't really enjoy, and I try to delegate those off. Also, one thing I find is like I'm going to go particularly with the office staff. There's things that they really are good at, and it makes them happy to be able to do. And I shouldn't be spending my time doing those things. For example, we have a newsletter that goes out once a quarter, and that newsletter celebrates a lot of the things that we have that have happened over the past quarter. And I have somebody who's fantastic at doing it. I review it, I add my input to it, but I shouldn't have to worry about lining up um all of the pictures and the words and stuff that she's so fantastic at doing, you know. Um yeah, a lot of our checklists, I make sure that they include the information that I want, but I have people that are really good at formatting.
Yeah,
So they should be doing those things and not me.
exactly. So yeah, keep the
I
big
could
picture.
spend all day trying to format something. That's no good.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. Me too. I know that Stephen and I both have had plenty of fights with Microsoft,
Yeah.
and trying to do things the way we want them to be. So perfect. It's that idea of let the stuff go, and sometimes that's hard, especially when you start the business as the original person, to let these things go. But you got to do that so that the business can grow.
Well, it was all me in the beginning. You know,
Exactly.
and you know that, Chris. It was
I
just me.
remember.
So it's been fantastic being able to hold on to the things that I really like and let go of some of the things that I was like, oh, thank goodness somebody's here to help take care of this now.
Yeah, somebody that's better at it than me, and not to mention I
Yeah.
don't even like doing it. It's perfect. All right. Our last point before we get into sort of wrapping things up and going to our question and answer is the use data to predict future moves. In other words, that don't just do things based on, I think that I'm just going to do this and sort of do it on a whim or just how your gut feels, but really back it up with data. And so this is like, make sure you're collecting and getting the data that you need so that you can understand the key indicators. So figure out what it is. What are the key indicators for your business? And if you want to know more about that, we did a session on that. I want to say it was last year sometime, maybe the year before, but there is a flight school connector where Elizabeth went through all the types of key indicators that might be useful for a flight school or just suggestions for that. So really make sure you're measuring, figure out what are the key points that you think are important to measure what it is you're doing, and then start measuring those and tracking them. Monitor those for trouble alerts. You know, and it's like, and one of the recommendations here was that it's like, you know, when it comes to things like cash flow or performance metrics, don't do it every month. Like you need to know cash flow like today. So they said really recommended doing it on a daily basis and having that happening so that you can catch things quickly and seeing like, whoops.
We lose Chris for a second. Okay. Where did that go?
That's okay. We've got this.
Now I've got a copy of the presentation I can bring back up where what he was talking about. He's got kids at home who are using the network for school stuff. There he is.
Hey, I'm back. Sorry. Microsoft decided to log me out.
For your
it was
convenience.
for my convenience, they logged me out.
Great.
So I'll see if I can pull up the PowerPoint while I'm speaking. But the idea there was to measure those things and make sure that you know what's going on so you can take action right away. And I know that you talked about your spreadsheet person, Brenda. Can you tell us a little bit more about like how it is, what the data is you're looking at, or some of how you go about doing that?
For example, I've known exactly how many hours we need in order to support each part of the business. And then I can look at what we're actually doing on Flight Schedule Pro and see if we're covering those hours or not. Look at what the maintenance facility is doing and see if they're covering those hours or not, and know exactly how much money each of those hours is going to produce and how many of those hours we need to pay the bills. And that spreadsheet that I have is fantastic because I can just change the numbers for anything that I need.
So perfect. I guess, are you it sounds like you're monitoring those on a regular basis. Have you ever had a situation where you've been able to identify like, whoops, something's not right here, got to fix it?
No, because we're always awesome. No. No, really, the flight side is really pretty easy to maintain the hours necessary. Going into the maintenance has been a bit of a learning curve for me. And that is where I'm really able to start shuffling the numbers around and seeing where we're going to need to make changes. So yeah, that has been a huge help.
Cool. So it sounds like you're on top of it. And so what I want to do now is let's just wrap things up and then answer any questions. And we've got a couple questions, so I'll go back and see if we can hit some of those. There is a handout that should be available. And if not, we can get that to you. So Stephen, have you been able to put that in? It should be in there. And then so on that handout basically is a list of all the articles that I used when I was researching, and I compared stuff, and I just left the outline of the kind of the highlights, so it helps you find stuff. So you're interested, you can read more about that there. And then we're going to do Q&A here in just a second. I just wanted to mention again that we have the scholarship coming up. So don't forget about that, aopa.org/scholarships. If you missed that at the beginning, we've got, it's ending February 11th for the application period. So make sure you come back and check that out. If you know of anybody for the high school ones, make sure that they've taken their written test. So if you know of any high school students, there's a good opportunity here to get a $10,000 scholarship. So let's go back to the Q&A really quick, and then we'll wrap things up at the end. We've got about 10 minutes left. And in fact, I know, by the way, one of the things was when it came to the marketing aspect of things, I know that Chris Erlinson's on the call, and that's something he does. He does a lot of analytics with marketing and advertising. So there's somebody there, and it's like, and he'll be at the Fazana conference, I know, coming up in just a couple weeks here. So let's go back. I'll kind of work my way backwards here. We recently migrated from, actually, this person's just asking about aviation consulting firm, and they can help, they can do that. All right, so this person's, Eric is asking, did you find becoming a 141 program increased your student numbers and therefore your revenue? What about airline partnerships or feeder programs? And this may also just be going out to the audience in general, but did you find that 141 helped with business?
No. Yes and no. Let me answer that twice. No, I haven't seen the growth from that I would have liked to have seen, but yes, in that there's a lot of people that think that a 141 program is going to be so much better that even though they want to be part 61, they want to go to a school that also offers 141. So it's been kind of a weird mix, but I'm glad we did it. I think it's been good for the business, but maybe not as exciting as I had hoped that it would be.
Okay. And then maybe if other people have had a different experience with 141 as well, they can throw that into the chat there for Eric. Second question Eric had for you was, do your flyouts and extras, the things that you do they generate revenue, or are they simply more just fulfilling the value of the experience, that sort of the cultural part? Do you find so is it a moneymaker?
Yes,
or is it,
and no.
Okay.
Doing a fly out, yeah, that generates revenue, most definitely. But also as flight instructors, I think that we spend a lot of time in the West practice area. We spend a lot of time flying to an airport that could be fun, but we just do a full stop taxi back and then we take off again because we've got to get to our next customer. So sometimes doing these flyouts, I make sure that I pay for my instructors to do whatever fun thing is at the end. So we go to Luray Caverns, Penn's Caves, we go have lunch in Lancaster, whatever it is that we're doing. So yes, they are revenue generators because we have students that might not have gone on a flight like this now going on a flight like this. And I think that it makes my flight instructors happy in that respect. And then the other thing is when we go, let's say we've done tower tours at BWI, at Dulles, we've gone to some control facilities. Those don't make any money, but they do get people really excited about being here and they connect people. So this student has met this student and now, they have that connection and they enjoy being here, but they enjoy running into each other and talking about their flight training. And I think it just adds to the experience for those things.
I would imagine that's probably a factor too, to help people have that momentum and motivation to finish the training too, to get through it and to continue.
Yeah. And I've found that people see the activities that we do and they choose our flight school for that reason. So it's not a direct income, but a more indirect income for that.
Yeah, helping get the customers there. That makes sense. And then the third question this person had was, do you do outside maintenance as well?
We do. Yes.
Okay. Dude, is that something maybe where, no, we don't have to get into a big discussion of that, but is it something where maybe you give priority to the flight school aircraft that are there when you need them, or is it?
Well, I'd like to give priority to the flight school aircraft. Doesn't always work the way I want, but yeah. I mean, I hate to say that we do give priority to it, but we also are able to schedule things. Like we know when we've got maintenance coming up, and we're able to keep those things flowing.
And that gets to that good planning thing, right? I would imagine watching the numbers and knowing like, hey, we got an airplane coming up, so let's get it slotted in there so get that 100-hour done or annual, whatever.
Absolutely. And Catherine takes care of both the flight school planning and the maintenance planning. So she knows when these planes are coming up for maintenance, and she knows when to put them on the schedule.
Cool. And then one person mentioned here, just Amanda saying, we more than doubled our student body with Part 141 because we were able to secure a university contract. Obviously, that's sometimes that 141 is key for it's making those connections. I know that there are the folks like in California, Arizona, Texas, Florida, where they do a lot of international training. Obviously, 141 is big there because you need.
Yeah, and it would be huge for that. But we have a huge community base of students, so it really, I mean, it's been good. I'm not complaining. I just, was not as overwhelming as I had hoped.
Right. I guess it depends on.
It costs money as well.
Yeah.
Like being 141 doesn't cost money, but doing all of the organization and the standardization and all of the time that it takes with the FAA, that all costs money.
There you go. So there's got to be an offset, right? So it's not just the revenue, but now there's an increased cost that goes with it. So how's that going to work out?
Right.
There was a question here. It says, Brenda, John was asking, how do you use simulators? How do you get students and instructors to want to use them? Mainly, he's talking about Part 61. He's saying. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think we all think that it's huge for instrument training, and showing people what the cost benefit is for instrument training is one way to get students to want to do it. And then as for instructors, again, I have instructors that are here for the long haul, and they're not just trying to build time, and they are more apt to want to use simulators because they see what a benefit it is to their students. But I think all of my instructors are pretty good about it. As for incentive, I don't know. I just make sure that they know what the cost benefits are and how, hitting that pause button is fantastic to be able to explain what's going on.
And I guess it depends on the type of sim that you have as well. I know that we've got access to some where I do the training stuff, and it's like I love it for just doing procedural things. Emergencies are amazing to do in a sim where I can just over and over and over again. And by the time I'm done with you for about half an hour, 45 minutes, you'll have your emergency procedures down pretty well, just because you could just keep repeating it. So it's cool. There is one other question that was somebody asked your conversion rate on. It's going back to the discovery flights question, and there's some other comments just happening in the chats, but just the last question I guess I'll ask is the conversion rate on discovery flights. So you talked about how you do them on a regular basis and they do pretty well. What kind of conversion are you seeing on them?
I don't have a hard number for you right now, and I'm sorry,
okay.
But those. I guess we all know that there's two different types of discovery flights. There's the birthday experience or the Christmas present, and then there's the ones where people are really interested in flying. And the ones where people are really interested in flying, we do pretty well with. And the birthday party ones are nice too.
Cool. Well, yeah, that's obviously that's where you want to make sure you're at least breaking even, if not making a little bit of money. For those, right? So you don't necessarily have to give your own birthday gift to the person. Okay. Well, it looks like in the chat, barring any other questions, we're coming to about a minute to go in our hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. Brenda, I want to thank you for being here with us again. I really appreciate your insight today. And somebody's asking about charter. We'll see if we can get to that one. But let me just go ahead and wrap things up. Maybe tell us what it is you need out there in the audience. We have got our email there at ftinitiative@aopa.org, or throw it in the chat if you have any ideas for topics you'd like to see. And speaking of simulators that we just talked about, next month, we're going to be having somebody, Josh Harnagle from Redbird, will be on with us and talking about what you can do. He's not just going to sell you Redbird sims. He's really going to talk about more about how you can utilize a simulator to help you bump up your business. So what can you do to utilize a sim? What are some recommendations or ideas that would help you grow your thing? And in fact, there it is. I know we've been working on our new kind of theme for the titles. It's the simulation implementation. Again, if you're a fan of the Big Bang Theory, it's something we like. And so that's to help grow your business. So the one person said just they asked if maybe we can do this very quickly, Brenda, before we sign off. It says, have you weighed the pros and cons of adding a charter division? Have you thought about that at all?
I have. Okay. Oh, to be really honest, I think that you should do what you're good at. And I'm good at flight training. And that's where I'm keeping my focus right now, is flight training and the maintenance. I feel like that would be for another day for me. Right now we're focused.
And talk about an answer to kind of wrap up the idea of what we were talking about, which is finding the right people and asking for help in doing that. So reaching out and getting that network. So highly recommend that. And that's a great answer, Brenda. So thank you again, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Brenda. And I guess with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off. Please let us know if you have anything else. Just hit us up in the email, and I will turn it over to Stephen. Would you take us away?
Thanks, Brenda. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Jamie.
Bye, Jamie.
Bye.